Because we talked about fear, there's like no way that we can kill the fear inside us, kill the jealousy inside us. There's no way that we can do that. It's just like we have to acknowledge and we have to accept that it's inside us. And then, just like I said, we have different selves, and those are one of the selves. And again, it comes to mind, the manager. So how do we manage the whole thing? And it's okay to feel fear sometimes. It's okay to feel jealousy sometimes. It's just how do we manage it? It's important.
You know, it's possible sometimes, at least in my experience, that the negativity isn't really negative in a sense, because it's alerting you that your attention is needed somewhere. Like if you're jealous, you're into your ego, and your ego is gonna get you to feel that, because there's a competition going on there somehow, and you're thinking that you're needing something that you really don't. So if you're not alerted to that, then you're not gonna understand it. And I think probably that we're living in a classroom of some sort, and if that's the case, then all these negative emotions are indicators that something needs to be looked at. Uh, and I don't know, the idea of tempering it or trying to get rid of it, I think is not really the way to do it. That's never really worked for me, because you can't get rid of it. I mean, it'll come back in another form. So, but if you can see that the negative is important. I mean, this is the lesson in Genesis with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and the tree. A lot of people don't understand it. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and if you break the world up into good and bad, positive and negative, then that's hell, and that will take you right out of oneness, which is the Garden of Eden. I mean, it's all one. So there really isn't a negative side and there isn't a positive side. There's just whatever's happening in this present moment, and that needs to be addressed. That's the
Yes.
way I see it anyway.
No, 100%. Because the nature of the whole universe is duality, good and evil. But then when you look at it, from the broader perspective, it is all one, and it is all goodness, and it is all love. So that's the whole idea of oneness. And like a lot of times, bad things that happen to us, like the negative thing that happened to us, then as we get older, as we get wiser, we see how they made us who we are today, and how they play such a major role in who we are. Usually the negative points, they had like even play a bigger part in who we are than the positive points in some ways. But yeah, I'm 100% with you. And the tree is one thing that Master Taheri was saying is that, so think about it like the observer was talking about. So if we are up there, let's say in the heaven, and there was no duality there. It was, so if we call this a bipolar universe, let's call that unipolar universe. So there was no bipolarity. And what happened is that the apple, it's kind of, they asked us if we want to have the experience of this whole cycle, and we said yes. So in a way, we chose to experience the whole thing, but thinking about that there is no time up there. The whole cycle also happens in a fraction of a second. As say, we said yes, we want to experience it. Also, we finish our experience. So we are still up there, but also down here. So that's why it's a little bit confusing because of time, how time works, but time only exists in part of this cycle.
Well,
And
I understand perfectly what you're saying when there's a higher form of consciousness behind and outside of us. That's, I mean, right now, like, just think of where consciousness is. I mean, it's not anywhere in particular, but yet everything shows up within it. So it's outside, on the outside, looking in. And when you look in, what do you see? You see an egoic identity, which is like who Brent is. Like Brent's a story about like who I am, but I don't know completely in totality who or what I really am. I don't know that, and I don't think anybody really does, because it's inclusive of everything. And we're just, I mean, how old am I, and how long have I been alive, and am I going to understand all the answers to all the questions that the universe poses? It's like, no, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to have experiences that are slowly but surely going to tell me things. And here's a really important one that happened that was really, really a good thing. I met this lady, and I don't think I've told this story. I met this lady, and she was perfect. She was beautiful. She was intelligent. She was conscious. She was spiritual. She had it all. And I started falling for her immediately. Unfortunately, she did not see me the same way at all. And so I got rejected and felt terrible. And the next day I was laying in bed and I was thinking about this. And I do my little talking out loud routine that I normally do. And all of a sudden I began to realize that my consciousness had completely identified itself with being a person who wanted and needed and should have a loving relationship, and should have somebody with me in this loving relationship. And that was going to complete me. And so my consciousness just sort of lifted out of the story and looked down, and there poor little Brent was in bed feeling sorry for himself, and forgot that what he really is what's outside of all of the appearances that show up in this four-dimensional space-time world, including the mind-body organism. And that's not me. Brent is not me. That's not the limit of what I am. I'm inclusive, and everything is within this one consciousness. And so I forgot that, thought I needed another person in my life. And so the negativity that I got from that was from the idea that I was totally separated from the truth of the oneness that's outside, that sees itself as an individual most of the time, but in reality we're all one outside of these images of ourselves, which is just our egos. So then that became clear. That became very clear, and I saw that negative experience of feeling rejected as being an extremely important one for me in that moment, because I got lost. I got lost in the story of thinking that I need another human being to be alive. Now, being in a relationship, in a very conscious spiritual relationship with another human being, would be wonderful, wouldn't it? That would be wonderful. But if it's not there, and you don't have that, then it's not that you need to have that to be fulfilled. Because if you're one with yourself, one with all totality of oneness, then that's what we're looking for. That's what we want to get to, because we're not satisfied with ourselves as individuals.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, and you talked about ego, and it's interesting because the whole, like, when we go through the cycle of life, one question remains at the end is that, and that's when, because as we go up, we do receive, like, we are also more spiritually evolved. So we do receive godlike powers towards the end of it. And there's only one question that remains, and that is, are you by yourself or are we together? So it's like your ego, it's the question is always our ego. So is it just me or is it us? That's the whole question. And that's the question that we kind of have to deal with every day in different situations to get ready for that big question. And so what happens also, he, like in one of his lessons, he talks about it, is that once we say it's us, then we would get kind of in that oneness. But if we say no, then what happens is that we come down the cycle again. So some of us, we just like doing this cycle like hundreds of or millions of times until we say yes to that question. And this cycle is not only just, and this cycle of life is not going to be the only cycle of life that we all going to experience too. So that's also like some other lessons that he goes through. But it's just because you mentioned ego, and just want to say that that's the whole question of this cycle of life. It's about our ego, because our ego is what's in between us and that oneness.
Kelly, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I do actually. Okay, so about ego. Um, yeah, I kind of go back and forth on it a bit because I think it's important that we have it. I don't think that it would be here if, I don't think that it would be within us if we didn't need it. But one thing that I am wondering is maybe what we need to learn is how to use it properly. What are your thoughts on it, Shima? That's what I'm wondering.
So what do you mean by using it properly? Because
So-
sorry, just the way I see it, it's also all my understanding from his teaching and all I know. So it's not that I know a lot.
No, I understand.
But yeah, so my understanding is just like goes back to the selves, and I see ego as one of the selves that's kind of dragging us down, because what happens always, we feel like more important, and like our selfishness. So this is all what really kind of drag us down from that greatness. So that's how I see it. But in terms of like maybe it's useful for us, can you just maybe explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So jealousy, envy. What I was gonna say is something like jealousy is unnecessary. Something like envy is, unnecessary. If you can limit your ego to just not allowing people to walk all over you and take advantage of you, then that's how it should be used. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not trying to say I'm right. Because my thought is that it's not good to be jealous of somebody else just because they have something and you don't. However, it's also not good for somebody to try to enslave you. And so
No, yeah, 100%. It's
yeah.
you definitely want to speak up for yourself. And one of the things, it's like when you become aware, the whole awareness is that you want to fight injustice, and it's like kind of become your responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is like you definitely want to stand up for yourself and for justice and for fairness and all that. And that has nothing to do with ego. It has just to do with, to me at least, with humanity, with who we are.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's like how I see it.
But I think though that when people say let's get rid of the ego, I think that that's what some people mean. And I don't think that that's a good idea.
Well, I think Brent, what Brent was, correct me if I'm wrong, Brent, but I think what you're getting at is you can learn from that, right? When your ego gets in the way and there's something that happens and you behave a certain way, you can learn from that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ego is really tricky, and if you want to get rid of your ego, that's the ego talking, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way I see it is that all the identities that tell me I'm something in particular that is not oneness, those identities are all part of the ego. So if I think I'm Brent, the individual, that's my ego. Because ultimately we're all one, there's just oneness, and that's what we're waking up to try and discover, I think. And in order to do that, we have to be able to identify all the things that is not, which means every time that we think we're something in particular, like it could be anything, it could be, oh, I'm love, or I'm consciousness, or I'm light. I mean, all those things are interesting, but they all show up in consciousness. To say that you're something that shows up in consciousness means that you don't understand the totality of what oneness is, because oneness is inclusive of everything. And so you can't be any one thing. And if you see yourself that way, then that's an immediate limitation, and it's going to get you in trouble, and you're going to suffer, because that's not ultimately what we are. I can't say what we are. I don't know what that is yet. But I do know that I'm not Brent, and I do know that I'm not anything in particular.
Can I just read something again from that interview that Master Taheri had? And it is necessary for a human to start to know himself and turn his quantitative and materialistic outlook to qualitative one, and recognize his stance in the whole universe.
So can you read that again?
Yeah, it's probably better. It is necessary for a human to start to know himself and turn his quantitative and materialistic outlook to qualitative one, and recognize his stance in the whole universe.
Yes, I think it has to do with like the whole Irfan, we talks about knowing in quality rather than quantity. Because when you think about quality, okay, so this, I'm just gonna say something else first. So the where it stands on universe, like that's also a view of Scientology. It's like, what are we doing in this universe? So what is kind of my responsibility? What are kind of my duties? So where do I stand here? But, and then the quality version of it, that's why Irfan, we can't really separate Irfan from anything else, because it talks about quality. If you think about it, we go to work and two people go to work, they have same job, they get paid same amount, everything same. But one of them works like does her or his best on the job, really cares about people, and the other one just do it just out of the necessity. And that's where the quality comes from. Like, I want to go on a trip and I go with my friend, and like both of us going the same destination, but how we go about it, that's the quality of it. We all going through this circle of lives, but how we do it, because there's just, obviously we are going to, we are born and then we're gonna die to another life and to another life. So we are going through this train of lives, but how we're going about in these trains of lives, that's what Irfan talks about. And that's why it's important, the quality of life, the quality of living, basically. So that's that.
And I guess that's because that quality represents consciousness. So when we leave this biological computer and we go into another one, that quality consciousness is in that other body in the future, right? Like whatever level of expansion we're at, we carry on to the next life.
Oh yes, 100%. And that's the whole thing, because after when we die, there are certain of insights like consciousness, insight, knowledge that we take to the next life, just like we brought to this life. That's why we see two like newborns that don't have the same personality, because what they brought to this world is different. So they brought their personality, their knowledge from the previous life. And what we're going to take to the next life, it's certain insights. Those insights is, one of them would be the understanding of oneness. The other one would be all of us are manifestations of the divine manifestations. And that's why it's important to respect other beings, other things, because everything that we see is a manifestation of that divine being. So that's another insight. The other insight would be that the whole universe is purposeful, and there's a purpose to it. So these, like there are, I can go through them, but so these are the insights that we take with us to this, just like you said, like expanding our consciousness. We take with us to the next world, and so that's kind of make our personality too.
And because the ultimate is perfection, we really should be focusing on perfection. Would you not say? So when we look at another human being, rather than looking at the flaws, we should be looking at the perfection of that being.
Yes, and no, so in a way we should. So in a way, like I respect other people because they are that divine manifestation, but also on earthly matters, I have to deal with them based on earthly things. So if they rob my car, for example, I have to deal with that. So that side, so I respect them as a person, but then that's what they did, and I also have to deal with this too. So just not to confuse the two.
It's funny. I just had my car stolen about
No.
4 days ago, and so it's great because you get to, be in the moment, be in the present, and say, and examining your reaction to things, and I guess maybe it's I didn't get upset really, just trying to figure out, how it happened, what happened, but I also did a lot of thinking about this other person, and I felt I was thinking about it today, and it's just like I'm in a relationship with this person and I don't even know who they are. And I'm trying to think of, what this person's like, why he did it, whatever, right? But I'm not being judgmental about them. It's just, this is what happened. But like you were saying, Shima, you just have to deal with it, and so yeah, it was an interesting experience, because I remember somebody watching somebody who had their car broken into, and and explaining it to somebody, and the expressions they used, they said, "I feel like I've been raped," and I was aghast at that. It was like, how could you feel like, unless you know what that's like, how could you relate it to something in the material like your car? And I just went, wow, to me that was just, it really hit me hard. It's just like, that is just wrong thinking. That is yeah, we get caught up in these things, but it's interesting you should bring that up.
That's a good reflection on the nature of our attachments.
Yeah.
And I've had my car stolen a couple of times. It's one of those kind of cars that's easy to steal. And at first it made me really mad because now I'm inconvenienced. Now I've got to figure out how to live my life without the car for the time being. So that was a big attachment, a really big attachment. And you don't find out about your attachments unless usually you lose them. And then you get a feel for that. So it's a wonderful learning experience to let you see a side of what's going on that's invisible.
But the attachments are funny because you mentioned them. When we die, there are two things that they are kind of blocking us or not letting us to go to the next world, like, or see the light. And one of them is our attachments. And the attachments can be good or bad. It can be something material, or it can be just our loved ones, our pets, or our spouse, or our children. So as long as we have those attachments and we don't have the knowledge, like the insight that I talked about, it's hard for us to see the light to go to the next slide. So we are kind of like getting into the gray zone of not being here, but not also being there too. So it's really important that's why it's really important in Erfanara just to talk about these insights, so that we have all these insights. It helps us also go through that tunnel to the next world.
Be interested to know if Master Taheri gets into like the mass consciousness, and does he ever talk about the manipulation of mass consciousness?
Yeah, and that's called, so we are talking all the time about connection and through network, the positive network. So, but the network, the way the internet works like this, is based on that duality we talked about, it's a positive network and it's a negative network. So the negative network has its own connections too, and has its own ways of doing stuff. And that manipulation, mass manipulation happens through that negative network, and in a very much bigger way than it has happened through the positive network. I think it's like really fall behind, at least for the time being. But yes.
So that gets back to what you said last week about religion, and was it last week? Yes, I think so, with the water. That religion starts out pure.
Yeah.
But over time it's been polluted.
Yeah.
Right. But it still is that original religion. It's just it's been altered over time.
Yeah. And that is also the religion is also some sort of a enlightenment, some sort of divine inspiration, whatever you want to call it too, right? So they are just normal people like you and me, that they had this, and that they had this enlightenment. It's just trying to share their knowledge with other people, and that's how religion really formed. But obviously then there are other people who really make these people really big. At least I know it's like how it works in my culture and some other culture as well. And that does two things. First, it really takes off the importance of that person, of what it does, of what they did. Because if we think about it as a normal person, that they went through this journey and they received those enlightenments, then I think and we know that there's something big, there's something great about them. But if we think about that they're extraordinary people with extraordinary power, then we really take that greatness away, because then I would say, hey, if I had that kind of power, or if God made me an extraordinary person also, then I would do that too, right? But it's just good to know that Jesus was also like a normal human being, or Muhammad was also a normal human being, that they received this kind of enlightenment. So that's, I think, also it's important to know.
So I hope we can hear from Cody.
Oh, Cody.
Yes, Cody.
I finally got my thoughts together to figure out what's going on. It took a little while. I have this concept, and I think it fits in with what pretty much everybody said so far about what am I, the identifying self. And so part of I is this ego thing that we've been talking about. Part of I might be what unity, or this oneness that we talk about. And Shima, yours is such an interesting new thing for me, because it's like the internet of all these interconnected things. And if we can identify self with that's new for me. And I want to track this guy down. I want to follow your references and whatnot. But the thing that nobody's come up with yet is, what do we actually do to solve this problem? So we've got all the pushes and pulls and definitions and these quite beautiful paradigms, actually. But now, how do we fix it? So Shima, in your case, you got a big circle with and we get a chance to say yes or no every once in a while. And if we finally say yes someday, we're going to kick out of that. Well, how do we get there? How do we do that? And like the how to, what's the training? So right now I'm into Buddhism. So the Buddhists have actually an answer. And whether it's the answer or the grand poobah of all answers, I'll let you know when I get to heaven. I'll send you an email. But anyway, that's that puzzle of what am I and how am I going to sort this out? And what am I expected to do to get off the circle, or to get out of reincarnation, or to get to heaven, or whatever paradigm you want to use. What I'm most fascinated by is the methods. How do we do it?
Okay, so the circle, it's like a train. So we are in that train. So whether we want us or not, we are on the move. We are going from one word to another, whether we want it or not. And it's just a term, it's just again, it's just the quality of how we do it. And how we do it with connections, and the connection give us the knowledge, give us the insight that we need to have that knowledge to just go about our way. And then again, hell, like we go through hell, like, and that's the thing, we like the train goes through hell for everyone. And hell, what hell is, it's our, when we it's our regrets. They think about it as a channel of awareness that you go through, and then you see the, like, all the lives that you've been living in one hand, like a movie in front of you, and there is no time there. So think about it, that you see everything at just fraction of a second again, and how you could have gone about it. So what you did versus what you could have done, and this comparison, that's what burns you. And I think that we also feel it in this world too. Sometimes we feel like, as we just like get older and wiser, feel like, oh, I wish I have done that differently, and I would have like been this and that if I had the knowledge back then, right? So then sometimes I like you, that really burns you. So that's the channel that we call hell, because that's what we see. And then heaven would, when after we go from this channel, is we go to heaven, where that's where all the knowledge is. Like we know everything. We have that power, that if we have the power of creation, so we can even create our own words. So then that's also heaven. So, but how we go about this, it's all about with connections, and the connections also stop when we go through hell. So it's also, we kind of surpass the connections and the whole consciousness too. So then there is only one question: is it you, or is it just me, or is it us? So it's just your ego that remains.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
My 2 cents, Cody, would be seek only one thing, and that's truth. Don't seek anything else, because the truth, when you get the truth, and when I get glimpses of the truth, I feel extremely happy, extremely fulfilled, extremely in oneness. But if I was seeking happiness or I was seeking fulfillment, there's other things that can do that temporarily, but not consistently and always. But the truth always works out to where another level of truth, and I feel like this is the path. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's just following to see what's real and what's true, because I have no idea what exactly I should be doing other than that, because I don't have the truth. If I had the complete total package of what the truth was, then that would be something else. But I don't have that, and I can't say that I know exactly what the truth is before I find it. Even I got an inkling for it, but when you find the truth, that's the highest level. I mean, that's everything right there. The truth of the way oneness is, the truth of the way the world works, the truth of the way, the truth of anything that you can say is the truth, and that's ultimately, I think, what we should be looking for, and that's what works for me the best.
And do you do that, Brent, through asking questions, like show me the truth, or like how do you go through that process of seeking truth?
Well, my process, I sort of woke up in the middle of one day when I realized that I'd been doing it for years, and I wasn't even aware that I was doing it. I bought a digital audio recorder in 2009, and I used to take it places, and there was always this one person that was there every single time. It was me. And I became fascinated by my image, and I started noticing that when I spoke, that I could listen to it after it was done and see more, get more information out of it than I could when I was actually speaking, because part of the brain is speaking, part of the brain is listening, so it's complicated. But if you watch your image on a video, and I'm glad that you're recording these because it's very helpful. When you see your face on a video, when you hear your voice on a recording, your consciousness can give it its full attention right there in the present moment. And so I started realizing that the more I talked out loud to myself, the more my consciousness would focus on the words, and the words come out of your mouth, and you're really not picking and choosing your words consciously. It's a subconscious process. So you don't even know what you've said until you hear it. So the words come out of your mouth, they go back in your ear, consciousness hears that, and then consciousness makes a comment on that, and then that goes out of the mouth and goes back in the ear, and then there's a comment on the comment, and this feedback loop starts happening where you're literally talking to your own consciousness, and your own consciousness is saying something back. And so that produces in the moment this energy field, and you can actually see it. It's a toroidal or a toroidal torus. It's called a torus or toroid. You can actually see this and realize that you're in the center where all the circles cross that make up the toroid. And outside is your consciousness looking down at you in the center of that toroid. And on the inside of the toroid is this four-dimensional space-time world. And you can actually see that. You can be outside and inside at exactly the same time. Feel yourself in both places, and also feel the distance and the space between all three of those. You can feel it all at one time if you're focused on that. And the way you get focused is you just start talking out loud to yourself about what you're feeling right now in the moment. And I do it every day before I get out of bed. I just start talking about what I'm feeling. And one thing leads to another, and you start sinking deeper and deeper underneath the ego, all the identities, and down into your heart, down into oneness, down into love. You just sort of sink right down into that. And so the revelation to consciousness of the nature of consciousness begins to happen. The nature of duality, the nature of oneness, like the nature of all these things starts appearing in consciousness when you're focused right in the present moment on what's arising into consciousness in that moment. That keeps you right in the present moment. It keeps you focused on what's happening and what's changing that's relevant to you, because you start talking about what you're feeling, and then that leads to what you want to feel. And so it gets you into a state that's very close to pure oneness. And it's the best thing that I've ever found. It's just an incredible experience. You don't need drugs, you don't need a book, you don't need teachings, you don't need a guru, you need nothing, because every one of us is the same in the sense that we're all capable of being whatever anyone has ever been. Like if you want to be Jesus or you want to be Buddha, it is available. You just have to find your own pathway that leads to the truth within. And it makes sense that we're all capable of this. Why would God create all this stuff and have special people that can do it and other people that can't? See, that's what we think is going on, but it's not what's going on. And once you get deep enough in yourself, you can actually see that this is true. And anybody who's ever lived has found this for themselves. They found this pathway to truth. They lived the truth, and they became a beacon of truth for others to see. So this is the only thing I've done that works. And it works stupendously well. And you just have to try it out. But unfortunately, most people judge it when I say talking out loud to yourself, because who talks out loud to themselves? Homeless people and crazy people. Yet
I do it all the time.
We all do. Yeah.
Right, to a certain extent. But it's also true that when you go to a therapist or you go to a counselor or anybody like that, what is it you do? You talk out loud to yourself in front of them, and their only function is to keep you on beam so your mind doesn't trickle off into other things that don't matter. So they'll just keep asking you questions. What do you think about that? What do you feel? And so you go, that gets you honed right on the problem, and inside you go. So the true guru is inside. The truth is inside.
And I think ultimately that's what Master Taheri's trying to get at in the long run, right? Because a lot of us have been pushed off these paths, and so Shima,
one thing that just like Brent said, there are infinite pathways that you can just go through it, just find your own and just go through that path of truth, just find that. So whatever works for you, it's not just like one way, because they're all different ways, and you can find your own way too. So that's completely true.
Yeah. I also think I'm going back to what Brent was saying about the videos. It's not just watching yourself in the video, but what I find, because I'm editing the videos and that, is I pick up so much more in the depth of what people have shared, right? And I do, suggest that everyone here, if you have time, go back into these videos and watch them. I think you'll learn even more, right, as you go through it. So yeah, thank you, Brent, for that.
Yeah, thanks, Brent.
Before
But-
you go, Dave, I do want like some final comments from Shima. Is there anything you'd like
Oh,
to
okay.
add before we go?
Okay.
I think but there is really like, this is like one of those subjects that we can talk just on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I think it's good. It's because the whole world is like a puzzle. And it's like every time that we talk about, it's like, we're putting these like pieces of puzzles, and that's the job of any human, just to find those like pieces and put it together and just find the truth. And yeah, and that's, I think we're doing that.
I do want to go back though, how Master Taheri came about this is he was asking really big questions, right? About, existence, like why are we here kind of things, right? And then it was then that this modality came to him, right? This
Yeah, he wasn't like, he's saying I was not religious or I was not like anything. I just had like these questions. And in terms of conflicts, I had the biggest I was like, because conflicts is like what we are trying to just make our conflicts lower and lower as we go through this path. And so he was saying I was just the statue of conflicts. I had all these questions and couldn't like really believe anything. But then that happens like one day to him, that he had this like kind of revelations, and then from then he learned about halqas, and he founded the fun halqa, like I think after many years.
Okay, thank you, Shima, for sharing this. And if you could send, some articles to me and
I
any
will.
videos you'd like posted, that would be great. Really appreciate. And thank you for everyone's information, their input and their questions as well. Thank you, Jacob, as well, for joining us tonight. Cody, Brent, Kelly, Dave. All right. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey guys.